If this is the place that you wanted to be in, awesome. If this is not the place that you wanted to be in, stay here anyway. I don't want you to leave, all right? So I'm gonna be your moderator. When it's time for Q&A, just look for me. I'll bring the mic around to you, and I'm gonna introduce our first person to speak. Of course, that is the panel there in front of us. But let's talk about Marcus Bernard. Marcus Bernard is the national president for Manners. Now, national being from the east to west coast, north and south, national president, right? He's the chair of School of Agriculture, Communities, and the Environment, and associate professor of agriculture economics and rural social and at the Kentucky State University, and interdisciplinary research leader fellow with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Yes, that was a lot. His recent research focuses on the increasing diversity and equity and inclusion in organic agriculture production, regulation, and marketing. Marcus utilizes his experience as a practitioner and academic to facilitate connections between research and outreach. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus Bernard.
Thank you, Vaughn. Good morning, everyone. Good morning? All right. So we're just going to do a quick overview here because we have a very exciting panel. And in this discussion, please make notes. Please write your questions down. We want to have a robust discussion here. And so without any delay, we'll go ahead and get started. And so the map here I have on the screen just kind of gives you an illustration of what organics look like in the country from the 2019 Certified Organic Survey. And you can see where Kentucky falls right in that mid-section area. And the interesting thing about this is that organics in certified organic farms in Kentucky is growing. The market is growing, the number of farms and land is also growing. In Kentucky, in 2014, as I said, it's growing. 2014, we had 107 certified organic farms. In 2021, we had over 240, more than double that number in a period of 7 years. And you can see by the little flags exactly where the clustering and location of those farms are. And if I had a 2023 map, you'd see a lot more dots of where we'd fill that space in. Now, one of the reasons we know it's growing is because there is, in addition to many returns, an economic return by going organic, as many of you know. So you can just see here just a glimpse, a snapshot of the organic sales from 2011 to 2020. And every year, it continues to grow. Every single year, there's growth. That, to me, says there is quite a bit of market potential and opportunity for anyone interested in organic agriculture. Along with that, we know there's a price premium that comes with organic agriculture because it's a different process that's taking place. And so you can kind of see here some of the vegetables and produce, as well as dairy, that is organic, and just kind of see the percent above in terms of pricing from traditionally raised or traditionally produced products. And the message is clear that if you go organic, doesn't mean it's going to be easier, Doesn't mean you're going to break the bank, but you do produce a considerably more valuable product to the marketplace. Consumers are every day, every season, every year becoming more conscious, and this is important to know where their food is coming from and how it's being produced. So, from a study or from a survey, we looked at and we read, what are some of the things that we can readily observe? And probably the most noticeable thing in Kentucky is that there were so few organic farmers, African American organic farmers, there was no demographic data being picked up on this population. So we know that actually in 2012 it was 33,000 black-owned farms, but that number has definitely increased. And so from that, we wanted to capture and begin to look at who are the African American organic farmers in the state of Kentucky in particular, and of course, how do we continue to build a relationship with them, and then also encourage existing farmers to explore organic as an opportunity. So some of the challenges or opportunities, depending on how you look at it, that we identified that would hinder or restrict black or minority participation were structural, systemic, information and knowledge, or even perceptions and attitudes around organic agriculture. And so we know it's important to increase the amount of information and awareness and exposure to this population about organic production and how they may take advantage of organic production. So that's what we're here today to talk about. We have a great panel, and they're going to tell us about their path, their experience, and hopefully we're going to be all better. I know we are after this panel. So without further ado, in alphabetical order, we're going to start with Ms. Kenya Abraham, and she's going to talk about Slak Market Farm. Please welcome Kenya.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad you all got here safely in the sliding roads. I'm Kenya Abraham. I am the CEO of Slak Market Farm. I've been operating a micro dairy creamery in Lexington, Kentucky since 2018. That's when we started our business. And we produce raw milk for human consumption for families all around our area. Some even more so far away. I've got people coming up from Liberty, Kentucky for my milk. So we produce raw milk, and we also have halal meat, which means that we give our animals proper end-of-life care and handling at their death and their rights. And so we also have pastured eggs. We build relationships with people through community and through relationship farming. And so everyone that comes to our farm is a part of our farm, and they own the animals with us. We operate a herd share for raw milk. I don't sell milk. Please don't call me or text me and say, Ken, how much is a gallon? Because it's not really about buying milk. It's about supporting and owning the animals with me on our farm. And so you bring your family to our farm, you know these animals that you're drinking from, and that is what we focus on. And so our focus for me means fixed on change until success. And our focus is for everybody to know who's on their dinner table, literally, like you should know the name of that chicken that you're about to eat. Like you should hold it and know it. And so that's what we focus on. And we've been very successful with that. Next slide, sorry. So these are some of the babies that have been born into our herd share that drink our milk. And so our process of sanitation is really important to us because babies drink our milk, not just my babies, other people as well. And so we started this with 1 cow and 1 herd share owner, and now it's home to 35 families and a community that's supporting my farm. And so in 2016 and 2017, let's go through the list. We leased the farm with an option to purchase it, and we created a business plan to try and make this work. I've conducted research and marketing to learn about my products in my market, and raw milk is something that is prescribed to us in the Holy Quran by God to drink. And so it's something, a religious right for me. And so I'll do this whether they change the law or keep the law or whatever. This is our right to this food. I learned about organic scenes in Kentucky when I first moved here. The first thing I said was, where can I get some organic eggs? Didn't bring my chickens with me. And I learned about oak through those conversations and building networks and relationships and partnerships with Black Soil Kentucky, CFA Kentucky, which is Community Farm Alliance, and just going to a lot of meetings made me realize that there was definitely a market potential here for what we were doing. And so I brought my first cow home. And through workshops and events with Black Soil and CFA and Kentucky State University coming to their Third Thursday program, it helped me develop more of, I didn't know what I was doing when I started doing this. I don't have a farming background. I'm 1 generation removed from farming, so I didn't grow up doing this, and it's been a lot of knocks in the head to learn it. I got some knots over here, but just attending meetings across the state to meet people and introduce what we were trying to do. And so we got on the way with it around 2019. It was just life in the trenches is what I like to call it, because I was living the life of a full-time dairy woman, milking cows twice a day, and my husband was butchering meat. And then here comes 2020, and things just kind of changed, and there was a shift. It wasn't terrible for us. I mean, more people were wanting to get to, their food and know where it was coming from. I was awarded the Small Farmer of the Year award from K-State and kind of became the face of Kentucky agriculture. This is what it is now. So I think that picture of that book is pretty powerful because it shows a Black woman in a hijab, as the Small Farmer of the Year. Thank you. In 2021, we completed the farm's new creamery right after receiving that award. And we were just kind of going into research on organic certification, not for my farm. I do organic practices, and I am organic. I don't have the label of certification. And the reason why I choose not to be a certified producer is because I don't sell to a consumer. My product is given to an owner, and so I expect them to be my inspector, my everything. But I was looking into research for our meat because we're looking at opening a slaughter facility, and I wanted to know about organic processing and all of that. And it sent me kind of on a path of looking into organics for the consumer side, which is important to me. When I go to a grocery store, I like to know that that product is certified. And so that's how I fell into the training for becoming an organic inspector. And so I am now an organic inspector, and I'm an independent inspector, and will be working this year. And I got that certification through the International Organic Inspectors Association. And so here's how you get a hold of us at the farm. I prefer everybody to email me, Kenya@slakmarket.com. Slak is the initials of my children's name. It's not that I don't know how to spell. So it's Sabil Layla Aya Kabam, slakmarket.com. And you can go to slakmarket.com on the website to look at what we do and all the options we have there. But thanks for having me today.
So next, we're going to have Mr. Keith McKenzie from Knob Hill Farm. Keith?
I'm going to put myself on a 5-minute timer if it's okay. Let's see here. Good morning, folks. Again, my name is Keith McKenzie, and I'm really excited to be here to share my experience with you, and also to continue to learn about what it means to be an organic farmer. Let's see what's on this slide here. We are located in Breckenridge County. I think we fell in love with that property because of its hills. But then I soon realized all farms are not hilly like our farm. So, but it's ours and we love it, and so that's what we have to work with. So my focus is we providing sheep, produce, and CSA products. Our mission includes creating a farm environment where folks can experience life on an organic farm, which is sustainable, environmentally friendly farm. My journey here to being an organic farmer is not too much of a stretch. I won't go too deep in that conversation, but we all have been involved, I suspect, in some sort of gardening or agricultural experience throughout our lives, and my experience is nothing different than most of yours. And it was, I realized I used the word subsistence, living subsistence farming. And so for you, but for us, my family, it meant that we didn't have much. We did what we did with what we have, and that was it. Not much more than that. So as life continued to progress, and I found myself here, a few years ago, about 10 years ago, I was about 30, 40 pounds more than what I am today. And my medical numbers was all over the place. So I made a lifestyle change that kind of, I think, was the nexus of finding myself here engaged in organic farming. Here you find ourselves, we just put up a fence. This is not a coincidence we're sitting on this fence, but when you do some work or you have a project and it works, you want to set and marvel on it. That's really what that picture's about. We put up a fence about 300 feet long. It's a wooden fence. It's nothing like a good wooden fence, okay? And so here to the right here is kind of, we have small plots, and it's rotational, and then it's also seen as 100 feet. Each one of those plots, I can get in there about 20 to 25 plants. You know, I can make the row smaller, but for us, we don't have any hard labor or help or anything like that, but for us, this is more manageable. And so we like this concept here. So that's what that pretty much is about. What did I note down there? Anything? Okay, all right. What else is going on? Okay, so here you find myself with this tractor here with my daughter. She is a lieutenant commander in the Navy. She went to, this is the parent in me now. She went to the academy. She's a Navy officer. She's down in Brazil, and she's right now putting things in place so Brazil can welcome future Navy officers as well. So I'm so proud of her. But that fence was in front of the property in which she owns. So she was up there bossing her daddy around that day. So here we are with some of the marketing things here, how we do distribute our CSAs. Then here is another shot of our garden. And our garden, a little bit more growth and deeper into the season. You notice I have electrical fence around this. We made a huge mistake in shutting down our garden for the year to remove that electrical fence. And that was we have a smaller plot of strawberries, and the deer's got our strawberries. So electrical fence has been a friend of the farm. Here's another look across the road here to the other side. It's another smaller plot where I put in my pumpkins and watermelons. The pumpkins did not make it, but the watermelons did great. The Fruit and Vegetable Conference down in Bowling Green, I attended a conference on pumpkins and watermelons, but I'm gonna give it another go this year. So there's a copy of my fruit and vegetable. Y'all know what that means, right? See if I'm gonna stick to it. That's the front entrance. That's how you can contact us. Look us up, we'd love to have you.
All right. Thank you, Keith. Next, we're going to have Miss Eymlin and Anthony Brooks from TurnerBrooks Farm. Some of my students had the opportunity to go to their farm, and they loved it, and they sent back a plate of catfish and greens, but I never got the plate.
We sent the plate, though. Mom, can you hear me? Okay. You're going to run the slides, and if you don't mind. I am Anthony Brooks. This is my wife, Eymlin. You pronounce it just like the letter M, Eymlin. You know, we're back home in Kentucky, and it's pronounced a few different ways, so I'll just try to give you that information first. And we are both the co-owner operators of TurnerBrooks Farm in Richmond, Kentucky, but the area is called Union City. Okay, and so we have 54 acres, and we have a high tonal production, cow-calf operation, poultry and meat goats. We have been serving the Union City area for over 100 years through agriculture and education. And it says, as a member of Oak's Transition Trainer Program, we will maintain consumer confidence that our products are grown and raised organically. But we are at the beginning of the process. We are not organic as of yet. And Keith's going to make sure I stay within 5 minutes, because I am a retired English teacher and I can go on and on to the break of dawn. And I'm going to try to give my wife an opportunity to say a few things also. But I'll look back up there as I give you a little brief background. My cousin, she was a female single black farmer who is the one who left us the farm, or left me the farm. I have 4 sisters, I'm the only boy and I'm the youngest, and they have been researching legally and in other ways as to how I got the farm, and they didn't get any interest in the farm. And I told them, because cousin Eymlin went to Kentucky State, I went to Kentucky State, and she passed it on as a legacy. She was an educator, I'm an educator, and that's the education part of what I'm personally interested in doing. Because I went to Kentucky State, I left and went to Miami. They, up at the Student Center, they said, would you like to teach in Miami? And I didn't tell them, but I thought to myself, I said, beaches and Disney, where do I sign? And so I've been gone for 30 years. I met my wife. My wife is from Jamaica, and that's one of the things with the goats that we do. I don't know how many of you have had curry goat or have eaten goat or goat head soup. And I could go on and on with that, the different things that you can do with goat. But we actually started out in a cow-calf operation, the hemp program when we came back. But to make a long story short, how did we get into farming? I went from Kentucky State to Miami as an English teacher, assistant principal, and I retired. My wife was a radiation therapist, and so when I retired, she said, well, you have a farm in Kentucky, why aren't you farming? Short answer, I've never farmed before. So we came back here, we got into the hemp program, we didn't even have a tractor. So I went to the neighbor's house, knocked on the door and said, would you plow an acre for me, please? And he looked at me like I was crazy, so my wife said, we're not gonna go through that again, so we went and bought a Kubota. So they delivered the Kubota, I got on it, they showed me how to use it, they were leaving, and they said, if you have any questions, call us, and they left it running, and that's how I learned how to plow my first acre of hemp. and I accidentally left the kickstand down because they didn't tell me about that part, so I plowed an acre with the kickstand down. And so that's how we got into farming, and we've been back to Kentucky for about 5 years now. We went from the hemp program. Of course, you know that hemp went from about $40 a pound to 40 cents a pound, so we had to throw that out. And so we got into the cow-calf operation. We bought, how am I looking on time? Because this is funny. We went to the stockyards to buy the goats. So we got one goat from Kentucky State. We call that our educated goat, of course. And he's in the lineage of the legacy of going to Kentucky State. But we went to the stockyards, and I saw a little baby goat. And I said, oh, that would be nice for my wife, and I got outbidded. So another small goat came up, and I said, I'll get that one. And so I got it, and everybody started laughing and said, that's gonna make you a nice Mother's Day present. I didn't know that it was a pygmy goat. So we were trying a few years back, trying to get the pygmy strain out of our group of goats, which we have successfully done so far. Honey, I'm gonna stop there because I know that I just have a few more minutes. But the reason we got into organics is because my wife said we're gonna go into organics, so we're going into organics.
Yeah. Yes. As far as organics is concerned, you know, Jamaican, and you know, when you have a Jamaican mother and grandmother, they always like speak to you in phrases that you sit and you wonder, like, what are they talking about? One of the things they would say is, don't use your teeth to dig your grave. And I'll let you chew on that. Don't use your teeth to dig your grave. And you have to think about the things that you consume, how it's grown, where it's from. You know, you're either going to eat healthy, sustainable food and products, or you're going to diverge and, you know, go through the long, arduous task of, you know, your synthetic fertilizers and where it lands and you know, what it does to your body. And you know, it's all about choices. I mean, most people may think organic is a hard choice, but ultimately, I think it's a better choice. And you know, it's sometimes the road to success is not always the easy path, you know, because we can all run into a fast food restaurant and pick up, you know, something real quick, and, you know, but really, what does it do to your body? Ultimately, do you pay for your organic living, or do you pay for your medication? So that's basically my choice for an organic, sustainable living. I will prefer to go the hard path and, you know, just, to me, take the healthier route than to pay for medication.
Go through, I think I'm all right. So there's Cousin Emil, who left us a farm, and keep in touch. This is our information.
Thank you, Tony and Eymlin. And I made a note in my phone on that quote. I love that. Don't use your teeth to dig your grave, and I'll let you chew on that. So if you hear it again, I'm just, giving you a heads up. So next, we have Mr. Jim Coleman from Coleman Crest Farm. Jim?
Let me get this together here. Thank you all so much. It's a pleasure being here today. I'm the fourth generation owner of Coleman Crest Farm. It's got 135 years of history. The farm was purchased by my great-grandfather and great-grandmother in 1888, March 27, 1888, and they had tilled this beautiful land as slaves, and they got their freedom in 1865. And then Booker T. Washington created the Union Benevolent Society that encouraged African Americans in their own churches to be able to pull their money together, kind of like a crowdfunding model. They just didn't have the internet. But they decided, because they couldn't go to the mainstream banks in Lexington, they decided to go through to get a mortgage at the Union Benevolent Society that Booker T. Washington created for $1,200. It was a $1,200 jumbo mortgage. And because of that, they were able to purchase the land that they had tilled as slaves. At that time, it was 15 acres, and they raised a total of 6 kids on that farm. Because of Booker T. Washington, from the late 1800s all the way up until 1920, African Americans were able to finance the purchase of over 15.6 million acres of land in the United States, which represented about 14% of the land in the United States. And they were able to accomplish so much with so little: no access to capital, no political capital, but they really found a way to be able to finance the purchase of the land. And it really made a big difference. So on that day, I like to say it transformed the lives of over 300 of my great-grandparents' descendants, including myself, over the last 135 years. My great-grandfather died in 1910. His wife passed sooner. And then that's when my grandfather, John and Molly, John was my grandfather, and Molly, of course, was my grandmother. They took over the farm in 1910. They raised a total of 7 kids on the farm. They used the farm to be able to send 5 out of 7 of their kids to college. They had a couple of their kids came to Kentucky State and got their degrees here. One of my uncles went to Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, and one of his classmates was a hard-headed guy named Thurgood Marshall, and he had to wake him up every single day to get him to go to class. And because of that, he finished with my uncle, went on to Howard University and got a law degree. And my uncle went to Meharry to get a medical degree. And we all know what happened after then with Thurgood Marshall. He became the first Supreme Court Justice, African American. And I like to say, if James Coleman, my great-grandfather, didn't buy Coleman Crest Farm, my uncle wouldn't have gone to Lincoln, and Thurgood would probably have dropped out. So it really made a big difference. Fast forward, my grandfather died in 1949. Molly passed away at the age of 51. My father was only 10 years old, and so she passed away in 1933. My grandfather died in 1949. My parents went to Kentucky State. My father studied agriculture, got his degree in agriculture here. My mother studied sociology. She pledged Sigma Gamma Rho. I see one of her sorority sisters here today. And they fell in love here at Kentucky State, and then they took over the farm in 1949, and they raised 5 kids on the farm, including myself. And they were able to, through everything that we sold everything that moved, from pigs, cows, sheep, tobacco, anything that could be raised on the farm, we did it. And it paid for everybody's education, including myself. My father made me the manager of the farm in 1978. I was about 12 years old at the time, and he said, "You're in charge." And that meant I had to do everything. Well, it was 1972. I went off to college in 1978. But in 1972, I took over the farm at the age of 12 years old, and I did everything. I took care of the pigs, the cows, the sheep. I drove the truck. I drove the tractor. And I said, "Daddy, when am I going to get paid?" He said, 3 hots and a flop. I said, "I'm already getting that." He said, "Now you're going to start earning it." For those that don't know, that means 3 meals and a bed to sleep in. But he made the big promise. He said, "If you do a good job, Mom and Daddy are going to send you to college one day." And that was the sell that he made to all of us. And when it got time for me to graduate from Bryan Station, my parents were able to use the farm, the proceeds, as well as taking out a loan for $5,000 for a total of $10,000 to send me to Howard University. It was $1,800 a year at that time, which was unbelievable. My father was like, "I don't know how we're ever going to do it." He took out a note on the farm, $5,000. He said, "I'll be dead and gone. It's on you to get it paid off." And that was the send-off. And so over time, the land has created a lot of generational wealth. It paid for college education, and it gave us all a living. It helped my parents to take care of us. My father passed away in 1989, which then my mother took over the farm. And she didn't do a lot of planning at that time, all the way up until the time she died, which is in 2002. My wife, Kathy, we lived in New York, and I was going to sell the farm because my mother had gotten sick, and I couldn't come down to manage it. My brother here in Lexington and sister, they weren't interested at the time in being able to buy it. And so my wife, Kathy, said, we can't sell the farm. Mr. Coleman would turn over in his grave. So we ended up buying the farm in 2001, and we held on to it for about 20 years. Unfortunately, Kathy passed away in 2020, April 3rd, when I was talking to the doctor about she was so committed to organic, and it's just chemicals impact our lives. And she came down with stage 4 cancer, and she passed away April 3rd, 2020. And I had a big decision to make. I sold our farm, our house in New York, and I decided to move my life forward, to come home and to restore my heart and my farm. And so that's what I did. And I was fortunate enough to meet the Wallace family. You can see that's Eric there in the gray pants and his son in the blue. And I had a big day out at the farm, and the mayor was out there, and he was on TV, and Gail's not in the picture, but their Grant's mother and Eric's wife called me on the phone and said, hey, we'd love to help you, and to help you to get through the organic process. And they did, and I've been blessed ever since. July 19th of last year, the farm became certified organic. We currently have 8 customers in Lexington, and we're going into our 2nd year. And so I'll talk about it more as we get into the panel, but these are the things that we did, big milestones in getting the tractor and all. I've had kids to come out there to work. That's Grant up there managing. That's me at one of my favorite customer restaurants, which is Ramsey's. One of my other customers is Dudley's. Got a family member there. And it's just been a blast. And I feel like I'm really doing all this in Kathy's legacy of providing a good product, helping others to be healthy, as well as helping myself to be healthy, as well as making the farm sustainable for the next generation. So thank you all so much for listening to the story.
Let's give Jim another round of applause as the certified organic farmer, USDA and Kentucky Department of Agriculture. I've been to his operation also, as others, and I tell you, I'm looking forward to this discussion, and I was really impressed with each one of you's operation. So now we're going to go through some questions, and it looks like, yeah. So each of you talked about some of the reasons and motivations for going into agriculture, into production farming, even a little bit about the decision to go to organic farming. But can you just expound a little bit on that path into organic production? Because we clearly see from data that organic agriculture is not very popular among African American farmers. And when you think about the amount of land loss, sustainability, and just overall cost of production, can you all talk just a little bit about your pathway and why you chose, just expand on what you have shared, and in no specific order.
Can you put me on the mic? I'll kind of stand up so you all can see me. I've worked for 4 Fortune 500 companies, Pepsi, Philip Morris USA, Oscar Mayer, and American Express. All of these are very addictive products that the companies sell. But I learned a lot about classical marketing and premium, the premium category, going after premium customers who have the willingness and they have the ability to pay. And so from that background, I realized that going organic would allow me to go after customers that would appreciate a high quality, fresh product that's all natural, as well as they would also have the means of being able to pay, and meaning paying a higher price than you would get out of conventional. It also enabled me to, instead of being a price taker, it allows me to be the price maker in the market. The customers are looking for a good story, they're looking for quality product, but they also are really moved by certified organic. So I've got 2 of my customers that are grocers in Lexington that really push it, and that's Critchfield's and Good Foods. And so my pathway was, when I came home, all I knew is that Kathy was just a big believer in organic. And I wanted to, again, to make everyone healthy, but I didn't know what to do. And I was fortunate to be able to find someone like Grant Wallace, who's a student at University of Kentucky. His parents had been raising organic for 20 years, and they put me right to work in all the things that you need to do to make your farm productive. Everything from having a reliable source of water. I said, Grant, you know, we're going to have rain. He said, no, you need to have a well, because we're going to need that on the amount of acres that we're going to be growing. So I had to make the investments in the technology, a tractor, the well, the irrigation system, which oftentimes African-American farmers who are just getting started don't always have the capital or the ability to be able to get that kind of financing to make the investment. Like my well and irrigation system, you're looking at about $45,000. Grant has a lot of great advice, but all of his advice is very expensive, because they are smart, and he's like Elon Musk. He thinks I've got millions of dollars to spend. So Grant's like, you know, we can do this. We're going to get a poly planter, which his father loaned us, and they told me all about the plastic mulch and, you know, the black fabric. These are cutting-edge technologies that a lot of farmers aren't using, but it put me on the pathway of getting to productivity and profitability, and getting me in there to those 8 customers, to where now we're going to go into having a hoop house this year, and we're going to expand, hopefully in the next 3 years, up to $500,000 in sales.
Wow. Wow. Others?
I'll go. I didn't talk about the reason why I became a farmer. Like, I used to own 2 loose-leaf tea shops, and my husband had 7 like cell phone stores. We were living the American dream, had a big old fancy house out in the suburbs with all the trimmings, and we were working ourselves to death, literally, and eating Cheetos for lunch with a Sprite on the side, because when you order food in is when your customers come, and so you leave your food over, and we were just living this terrible existence. It was the dream, the American dream, but we were literally sleeping, because we didn't know my husband's health was failing. He was diabetic and had no ideas until we ended up in an emergency room, and his whole backside had gangrene, and he was thrown into a surgery with blood transfusions, and they were telling me, you know, your husband's diabetes is bad, and, you know, he's anemic and all these things. And I said, he's not diabetic. Like, what are you talking about? And they said, his sugar's 480. You know, it's like off the chart. And I was just standing there with a newborn baby. She was like a week old, and I thought, oh my goodness. You know, when we first got married, we talked about halal meat and maybe getting a farm that had 3 acres or so, and we actually went and looked at one before we bought that house in the suburb. But everyone told us, you know, you can't do that. You don't have time for that. You're business people. You don't have time for that. So we kind of just walked away from what we had originally started on in the first place. And there was one doctor that was from India that would come in his room, and she'd say, why are you sick? Why are you diabetic? And my husband was scared to death. He was like, when she left, he said, that little Indian lady she's talking to me. And I said, but why are you sick? Like, really? Like, that's something to think. And we really thought about it. And he had about 6 months of healing to do, and I had about 6 months of nursing to do at home. And I had closed my tea shop, and all the stores were on the fritz. It was 2008 crisis was going on, and all the things. We were losing money here and there, and hospital bill, $130,000, $40,000 for the surgeon on top of that. No insurance, no health insurance. So we had to make a decision of what we really wanted to do. And if you watch enough Joel Sultan videos, you think you can do it all. It was like, that's what we need to be doing. You know, I'm like, we need to change this and change that. And it was just a fire that rose in me and him both, laying there that 6 months, that we decided we were going to jump into this. And I wouldn't advise anybody to do it the way we did it. I mean, we filed a bankruptcy and went through, you know, lost the home and all the things. I just wanted to keep my truck. And I will advise you that. Keep your truck. You're going to need it. That truck's out there right now, parked out in the parking lot. I kept the truck. And we leased a farm and got ourselves, you know, on our way, and just jumped into a swimming pool head first, not knowing exactly what we were doing other than YouTube videos and asking neighbors and trying to figure out how to do it. But I am into marketing. I love marketing. And I had decided, like, from that point, obviously, like, if I'm going to have chicken eggs, or if I'm going to eat anything or feed any animal to eat that animal, I'm not going to feed it garbage. Like, my mother used to bring me canned goods from the food pantry, and she'd say, I found these at the, you know, she lives in an apartment community with elderly people get donations. And she's like, nobody wants this, it's on the free table, and I thought you could give it to your chickens. And I said, Ma, if I'm gonna feed that to my chickens, I may as well go in the grocery store and buy these factory farm eggs. Like, if I'm gonna do this, I just feel like as a farmer, if I'm going to do this, I've got to do it in a way that, like, is nourishing the soil. Like, my cow's milk is delicious because our soil has not been tampered. Our soil is good. And that grass and energy that comes from that grass is going into that cow. And, you know, I can't drink processed dairy, and that's a whole nother story of why I chose raw milk and organic raw milk at that, is because I have issues myself with processed dairy. And so I wanted my children not to have those issues. And I want them to enjoy milk. I literally, to this day, almost get a watery, vomity feeling in my mouth when I think about drinking milk, because I threw up from milk my whole entire life as a child. And so I drink my milk. I started drinking my milk probably 2 years after I started producing it. It took me that long to even drink my own milk. You know, and so it's like, when I drank it, I didn't get sick, and I was just shocked by that. Not really shocked, I mean, but it's just amazing stuff. And it's a whole product that has everything in it that will nourish your body. It's a whole food, literally. You can live off of this. And my husband's diet for healing himself has to do strictly with a regimen that he does for himself through our milk. And so that's why we got into the organic path. It was just more about, for me, it's like, if I'm going to do this, this is how it's got to be done, or I may as well just throw in a card and go back to factory farm food.
Oh, were you going, Keith? Oh, okay. Well, then I'll have to be brief. But as briefly as I can state it, you know, when you know, some of the panelists talked about the enslavement of our ancestors, or talked about the progression to civil rights, or where we are right now, or how did people make money? People first started making money through agriculture, then industry. A lot of people from the South went to Detroit. You know, some of my family members went to Detroit to make cars, to make money, and now it's technology. I have a son who's getting ready to go to Madison Central to start high school, and he said, I need help filling out this form for my classes. What classes should I take? And you know, I happened to be on the computer at that time, and I'm looking at the global youth report on the future of jobs. You know, and I was like, well, you know, I'm looking at this, and he went on upstairs. We got something to eat, went on upstairs, like I wasn't even talking to him. And speaking of talking to them, and they're at the age of technology, how often do we talk to them? You know, because when I grew up, Daddy, and this may be gender discrimination or something, but Daddy would be out there working, and Mom worked a little bit, but it was almost like Mom's job was to take care of the house and take care of the kids and make sure there was dinner on the table. And I was the only boy, there were 4 girls, and I was the youngest, and I got the unfortunate job of working with Daddy. Because like you say, you do all this work, but you don't really get paid for it. But he says, well, you live here, I'm taking care of you, buy your clothes, all that stuff. Yeah, but I reach in my pocket, I don't have any money. But as far as how many of you, and you don't have to answer that, just think about it, have that scheduled time every day that you sit down with your family and your kids and you have dinner? You know, it's not like, well, what's for dinner? Let's go to Chick-fil-A. We'll go to Chick-fil-A, and I hope no members or representatives of Chick-fil-A are here, and thank God we're not recording. But for me to get a sandwich, what they're calling a sandwich, that has a bun, a piece of fried chicken, and 2 pickles. That's not what I grew up on, but that's what they like. And they must put something in there to get you to line up twice around the Chick-fil-A restaurant. But, you know, as I said before, I was here at Kentucky State and someone said, would you like to work in Miami? And I thought beaches and Disney, and I've been gone for 30 years. And there's a big difference in diversity and culture in Miami and being gone for 30 years and come back here and working as an English teacher, an assistant principal, a freelance journalist for the Black newspaper, on the board for the Children's Services Council to get a $61 million referendum to become the Children's Trust and to work with the Department of Juvenile Justice. And I think my numbers may be off, I stand to be corrected, that there's probably about 35% African American in Miami, and then come back home, and there's only 15% African American here. You talk about black farmers, what black farmers are doing, but there aren't even many black people here. You know, I should have figured that out when I lived here, but I wasn't interested in that, you know, at that particular time. But when I come back and crunch the numbers, and also I learned from working with these organizations that support children and families that you can look at a person's zip code and find out everything about them, who's getting pregnant, who can't read, who can't write, who's going to jail, who's... And when we talk about black farmers, and us as black farmers, and the average age of a black farmer, of any farmer, is supposed to be about 64 or something like that. God willing, I make it to September, I'll be 65. And I don't, that's me they're talking about. And on top of that, I'm black. So there's only about 1% black farmers. And then I'm gonna try to go organic on top of that. And that's supposed to be a struggle. But when you look at sitting down at that table and determining what's going to go into your child's diet, and then for me to marry a woman that's a radiation therapist that treats cancer patients, and I get ready, I'm a good guy, but I'm gonna tell you what, to drink a beer, or have a bourbon that Kentucky's so well known for, and she says, oh, have you been drinking? I had a beer. But to have to look at things like a Cadbury bar was 99 cents, and I would say, well, I eat a Cadbury bar, you know, that's my little enjoyment. And it's gone up to about $3 and something. But that's not good for you. For you to start thinking about what's going into your bodies, and start thinking about what's going into the bodies of your children, and start thinking about how much time you spend with them, what you feed them, whether or not you sit down at the table with them like they used to, I guess your parents used to do with you, to work with you on homework. What do you mean he doesn't have homework? Well, they don't have homework. We got this policy. What policy? What kind of policy is that? No homework. And to look at the levels where they're not performing in English, they're not performing well in math. Well, I see why. And then for the governor, and I'm gonna wrap up by saying, and then for the governor to say that we need money to build 3 more juvenile justice centers because we can't handle these kids. I understand why you can't handle these kids. You know, and I'm going to stop because we can go into that conversation, and that's not necessarily what we're here for. But let me ask you this question. You know, what are you feeding your kids? Are you having dinner? And I got kind of confused coming back to Kentucky because they said, well, we had dinner, we had supper. I don't know, was dinner, supper? When is supper? What's dinner? But what are they feeding the kids that are incarcerated? Physically, food, mentally. What do they plan for them to do if they get out? Thank you.
You have any? One of the threads, or two of the threads that I heard from your comments is the impact and influence of family and health as really significant drivers that got you on this path to organic production. When we look at the overall picture of organic production, there are not just the health benefits, but also economic, as we've discussed, and conservation or environmental impacts. Very significant as we're talking about changes to climate, changes to the environment, and as you mentioned, Kenya, the importance of good, productive soil. Do any of you participate, and if so, can you just talk about any environmental or conservation programs that you may have participate in, or any benefits you may have experienced from the environmental or conservation side of organic agriculture?
I think I want to, real briefly, when I was young, my mother she would go out and get seeds. She didn't have much money to spare. And the seeds, we would have to go and break the ground in our backyard with shovels and spades, and that was our tillers. I had 3 other brothers, and we would go out each year and plant seeds, and believe me, folks, we ate everything in that garden. But we could not reproduce that the next year. No telling what will come up the next year. But that was my hands-on experience with gardening and farming. I was from Davis County, Kentucky, rural Kentucky, and I also owned 32 acres in McLean County and engaged with nursery stock. I want to talk about that because it's kind of some of my roots. But from there, I got into an administrative position and got on the treadmill in that work environment, and that became the nexus of my energy for the next 20 to 30 years. And I had to do what my mother dictated and what that backyard dictated and what the industry dictated. And then in retirement, I just was thinking and being reflective on this. Now I get a chance to do what's important for me. And then one of the things I brought from the administrative world is best practices. That's one concept that was drilled in me while in the administrative world, was best practices. And once you get accreditation, we saw the accreditation of this behavioral health facility, and there was a 10 to 15% bump in income as a direct result of accreditation. So from that, it was just a no-brainer for me. So I kind of stumbled into this. So when we purchased our farm in 2004, we own and manage 71 acres in Breckinridge County. When we purchased the first tract, which was 14 acres, we reached out to NRCS, and we put together a plan with NRCS. And NRCS has talked about conservation, fencing, livestock, water, some of these key components when you're opening up a farm. And then so now you saw where I come from with the backyard, and it was just loosely implemented process, but it was about survival. You do what you can with what you have to work with at the time. When you could do better, you do better. Then you go from that into the administrative world, then you get up into owning your own farm, and you want the best for them. You want to do what you want to do and what's good for you. So NRCS was very helpful because at that point, I really got to understand what it means to manage your farm. I got to understand what it meant about soil conservation. I got to understand what it means about soil erosion, because some 5, 10 years later, I have to deal with some erosion still today. I also have to deal with fencing. Anybody dealing with fencing that just never stop? It's just it's ongoing and ongoing and ongoing. So with that, then I found myself, now I want to continue to do what's good and what's best, what I want to do. And then that's when I bumped up into organic farming. And that's how I find myself here today, is that I see the value. It is the economic, but even with organic farming, it's about sustainability. How can I best sustain this property for generations to come? How can I engage in best practices that's good for all, including myself, my family, and the community in which I find myself in? So hopefully I spoke to that.
I'd like to share one thing that I learned from the last meeting that we had here at Oak, which was about growing more sunflowers on your farm to help you to attract more pollinators. And we had a presentation here the last time where this gentleman got up and said, you can double the population of your pollinators if you double your growing of sunflowers. And so I did that. I grew about an acre of sunflowers, Zohar sunflowers from Johnny's. And I'm telling you, the bees, everything came to Coleman Crest this past year. I mean, it was so loud out there. And the benefit of this is that the year before we sold okra, and I was getting about 50 pods per plant. And because we grew that 1 acre of sunflowers, we were getting 90 to 100 pods per plant. I mean, it really had a major impact. And you're looking at God's way of fertilization and pollination. And without having to use chemicals. The other benefit that it made a big impact on the environment. Right over Coleman Crest, you've got the sky, and so with the Zohar sunflowers, it was pulling all the carbon and all the nitrogen and all the chemicals out and putting it all back down into our soil, making our soil richer. I also was able to sell some of the sunflowers, but the majority of the flowers ended up having anywhere from 15 to 20 bees. So I couldn't sell them because they were just there looking all beautiful and happy, and they would drink the nectar, and then they would get the pollen on their wings, and then they would fly off over to the okra and the tomato plants, and they would spread their pollen over there, and they were just having a blast. And so I just think those types of things at Oak, if you can get access to those kinds of ideas, these are ideas that don't cost money outside of the cost for the seeds. It's positive for the soil. It's positive for cross-fertilization, and it's positive on our impact. And so I love to try out those types of ideas, and that's what we're going to be committed to at Coleman Crest.
I'm going to follow Jim on his sunflower thing because I've been thinking about putting in a whole plow of sunflowers in my front pasture. We've changed our front pasture to be where we're going to do our garden production. We have a small orchard of trees there now for apples. And I had some bees, but they moved away, and I think I had them too close. Our property line's the interstate, and I think they may have been heading out to the interstate and getting whacked. And we had a family of bees move back in for a bit, and I was like, oh, we are blessed by Allah. Like, these bees moved into our bee hive, and they did, and then they left too. And so it's just been a challenge. But we came here in 2016, we didn't own the property. I was leasing my property, and literally, with my landowner, my land partner is what I call her, Jana, we made a plan to help me to be able to, I told you I was out of a bankruptcy, so I was not like I could just walk into a bank and say, hi, I need a loan, I'd like to be a farmer. And I've been told by insurance agents and everything, like they hate when farmers come in the door. They're like, you guys always have these smelly boots and blah, blah. So I wasn't going to do that, but I knew I needed to implement a plan that would work in order for me to get a USDA loan. And I've had NRCS come out to our property to talk about fencing, to talk about a plan, and we have like a plan that would be in place, but I wasn't comfortable putting the money into the fencing until we actually owned the property. And so just last year in November, we finished our USDA loan, and we now are the landowners of that land, stewarding that. That was huge for us. And so I am going to look at like all the things. I have a whole list of things right now, like on my desk, and probably could be doing right now, like for energy. I want solar on my roofs. I want a well, like Jim said, but these things cost money. And the NRCS programs, yes, they do cost share and all of that with equipped and stuff, but thank God with the last farm bill that came through, and we should mention farm bill in this meeting today, the farm bill is coming, and you should call your legislators and talk to your legislators about all the things. And CFA Kentucky, a little plug, has some information for that. But with that, we did receive a way for, like for me, when I look at a cost share grant, it's like you got to have that money up front for that fencing. And if I had that money already to do my fencing, I wouldn't be bothering you. Like I wouldn't be asking you for anything if I had that. So it just never made sense to me, and I felt like I couldn't afford it. But now they have, for producers like myself, a way to give you that money up front, like a loan basically. And so I'm going to get on that. So yeah, the practices, but we do our best. I mean, I try to do my best with pasture rotation, and I have done some fencing on my own to be able to rotate our animals. Running livestock is actually just managing grass. It really is. You got to know how to manage grass and the soil and all the things. And we haven't been the best at doing it, but we're doing it, and we're getting better. And now I have a soil pasture. I have a soil pasture manager that volunteers at my farm, and he's graduated from the Soil Food Web School, so he's all on it about rotating. And this year, it's on this year. We're growing fodder this year. The price of grain is through the roof. So I just paid for organic grain. I paid $29 for my seed bag that my cows get during milking. We do a grass ration grain seed, and literally $29. And my feed bill was over double. It's $999 this month. So it's, that's huge when it used to be $400. And fodder, I feel, is a way to, stretch that and give our cows grass. And I've been saying for years I'm going to do fodder. Well, we're doing fodder now. It's labor intensive, but we're getting through it and getting it done. But these are all the things that we're trying to do to just put some change in.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a great transition to this next question, which is talking about some of the challenges. And you've already started giving some tricks of the trade, some secrets, some ways to overcome some of these challenges. Could you all talk just a little bit about some of the challenges, and then what advice would you offer new and beginning and African American farmers to come into the organic space?
Couple of things that I think are big concerns. One is opening up your books and exposing yourself. I mean, most farmers, the last thing you want to do is to deal with the government. I mean, most farmers are trying to run away from the IRS. Now you're going to have the USDA to come in and run your business. And so I'm confident from a lot of the African American farmers that I've talked to, they're very concerned about the transparency, the reporting that you have to go through. I had Tony Silvernail to help me. He was tough. Yeah. I mean, he said, "Where's your OSP?" I'm like, "Well, OSP? I thought we were here to talk about organic." He said, "Yeah, that's what we are." I said, "Well, I'm just trying to figure out how do I get my dirt to be more productive." He said, "We don't call it dirt, we call it soil." So I'm like, I'm already behind. See, I'm already behind. And then when he got into, the reporting and the application, the amount of documentation I would have to keep up, to be open to having someone to come to visit your operation and, finding things that could potentially be wrong. So there's a lot of fear on that. There's a lot of fear of what the potential cost could be. Again, I spent about $45,000 on a brand new well, irrigation, the cost up front that I'm paying for all of the, the things that we would go out and have for the plastic mulch and the fabric. I got 900 sticks, tobacco sticks. Grant told me to go out and get 900 sticks for tomatoes. I mean, the list, it was like, I said, "Grant, you think I'm Santa Claus?" So the cost and the amount of time that it can take up to 3 years, fortunately, my land hadn't been touched for over 25 years. So I was able to accelerate the process. But for someone who's already out there growing, it makes it very difficult, no matter if you're black or white or no matter what. The bottom line is how am I going to go through that transition? The other big thing is weeds. Who's going to take care of the weeds? If I don't use Roundup, how am I going to get rid of all these weeds? I'm going to have to hire an army. So there are a lot of concerns about the risk. Most farmers, if 3 out of 10 things are working, don't change it. Things are going great. But going into something totally new where it could cost a lot of money, the last bit is the concern about, can I really get the price? If I go to Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, are they really going to buy tomatoes from me for $6 and $8? I mean, when you've been operating, low-cost operator, and basically discounting your product and just trying to get it sold. So there are these big changes in the mindset, but we've got to help African Americans understand that there is a big value. You can go from being a price taker to being a price maker. You're doing great things for your own health. I mean, Grant and I and all the folks that I hire to do my work, I don't have to worry about them getting cancer from me out there in the field. I'm doing a good job of making sure that my consumers and my customers are safe, and we're going to make a lot of money doing it. My goal is to get Grant to where he can be full-time and hire others in my community and get it to where that farm is producing a profit of $200,000 to $300,000 off of $500,000 to $600,000 gross. And you can't do that out here groveling and conventional and discounting your product and going to customers that don't want to pay. So that's why I'm doing it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I will say, and I'll speak to the aspect of being an inspector. And how it goes basically is it's what makes you organic is your practice, but what makes you certified is what you do in your office. And so for anybody that's what I encourage people is like, if you're thinking to do this, it's more about, you can't keep your paperwork the way I keep my paperwork. Like, I got a grocery bag with November written on it in 2020, and God forbid if they come, I'm going to hand them that bag, like, and here's 12 more. The tax time's a nightmare for me. I'm dying right now. But, it's what your production is. Most people normally don't always use chemicals. There's a lot of people that are doing organic production, but they just need to learn that backside and, managing how you keep your records. And it doesn't have to be papers, text messages, whatever. I text myself sometimes my records. If I need to know what cow calved when, I go through my text records. So there's different ways for everybody to do that, but just getting yourself to a point of that you can do that, and then with an OSP and all the things, and there's people to hold your hand, like what they're doing at K-State. There's also the challenge of being African American. Like, I didn't learn about this opportunity by way of I just happened to be, which I don't get on Facebook a whole lot, I just happened to be on Facebook and saw a post, but this was a cohort that was going on basically by Oak and KSU and KDA and the International Organic Association of Kentucky, and I had never even gotten any wind of it, heard of it, anything. And so, but it was supposed to be specifically for minorities. So how are we to reach out as organizations? We all need to think about how are we reaching out to these people that we say we're trying to help in marginalized communities, if you're actually not going into those communities or doing a really good job of, and this is a criticism, I don't mind to give it to you, but I mean, we have to do a better job at reaching producers who are African American and who are, in these struggles to walk out and say, hey, because I wouldn't have known about this opportunity. And when I got to the class, there was just a small handful of people that looked like me. Nobody actually looked like me. But I mean, just a small handful of people that were of brown skin. And, two of the people in the class were from a certifying agency that were reviewers. And they're women, so white women can qualify. So they're taking this, but really their certifier should have paid for their class. So we got we have some work to do as far as being effective in how we're going to operate with our communities and how we're going to reach our communities. And so it's one thing, I'm very progressive and I do what's important to me. So it doesn't matter to me. I mean, it matters to me. I've been discriminated against, in many ways and had things happen. But I believe that I am the blessed of Allah, and so I'm called to what I do. It doesn't matter to me if you want to discriminate against me, go right ahead, but you can't take something from me that God hadn't already given me, so I'm going to take it anyway. So, you know, when I say that, I mean, not everybody feels that way or knows that knowledge of themselves, and so we've got to get to a point where we can help producers, the 1%, to know that this is a good path and that it's an option for them as well. And, you know, I now have a business doing what I'm doing, inspecting. I expect that my son will probably, my daughter definitely, will follow and work with me. We're going to travel the world, go visit some lavender farms in wherever, France or whatever, certified organic farms everywhere. But it's a huge opportunity to work in this industry and be able to, it's important as well. Like, it's so important to me when you go to a store, which I do shop at the grocery store. I don't eat everything from my farm. Our vegetable production is really down. It's getting better, but when I go to Kroger or anywhere and I want to buy a package, it's pretty neat that I can trace that back. I've never shopped the same since I became an inspector. Like, I flip everything over and start reading all the stuff, but you can do a trace back and literally find that it came from Jim Coleman Crest Farm or whatever, and that's pretty important to me, like to know that somebody is there as a consumer myself, to know that these things are happening. And I have a lot of people who are, you know, on the other side of that aren't certified organic, that feel that we're like, you know, oh, that's just, you know, it's a gimmick or it's a, you know, thing just to get money. And they think that, well, it's all these challenges and this could be going on, but actually I've seen it with my eyes that we are literally trying to do the best to keep our practices good and keep the standard of the NOP. And so I think that's really important that everybody knows that, because I want to know what I'm eating. I just do. And it's important to me. And I just, back to the challenges and being the blessed of God or whatever, I will also say to anybody, especially, like, if it's important to you, you will do it. That's what my daddy taught me. And my dad was illiterate. But he taught me when I was about 6 years old. He bought me a bike for a 10-year-old, and he said, here, and I said, you gonna teach me how to ride it? My dad's Appalachian. So I said, you gonna teach me how to ride it? And he said, hell no. And I was in our driveway holding this big bike, and I was like, and he said, you'll get on it if you want to ride it, if it's important to you. He'd always just say that. And if I didn't do something, he'd be like, you ain't doing it because it ain't important to you. You know, so I never realized, but I got on that bike. I went down to the curb and pushed myself, and it took me about a week, but I started riding the bike. And I've known my whole life I can do whatever it is. It doesn't matter about the discrimination. I had a little small case with Kentucky Highland where they, you know, did some wrong to me. And I found myself going to a white man to speak to this other white man about what he did to me, and it's not right, and a couple of people actually. And then I realized I was standing in the shoes of my mother. And I'm putting myself in a position to ask. And that right there is like, I need to not do that. So I stepped out of that. You know, I literally had a lawsuit if I want, still do. But that's not where my focus is. If you want it and it's important to you, then go keep your focus and go take it. And there's nothing that can stop you. Nothing.
But before you go, so we actually have exhausted our time. We do have time for some Q&A, but I did want to give you the chance, Tony, if you can give a 1-minute comment, just 1 minute. I'm gonna put you on the time. Keith, can you put him on the timer?
Faster, good.
I did that on purpose. Here he comes. Yes, in 1 minute, just real quick. You know, we talk about discrimination, black farmers, white people, black people, rich. There's really no such thing as black people, white people. Everybody came from somewhere. And I didn't realize that until I went to Miami, because when I was taught in the education system in Kentucky, it was black people and white people. And then I saw a black guy that I thought it was a black guy when I went to Miami. I said, hey, what's happening? And he didn't hear me. I thought maybe it's volume. Hey, what's happening? He didn't say anything. I said, hey, what's happening? And then I figured out he doesn't speak English. And a Cuban lady said, what are you? What are you? I said, I'm black. No, what are you? I'm African American. What are you? What are you? Oh, you American. I said, yeah, I guess I am American. Because when we don't have an experience of going anywhere but America, then we're locked into the discrimination and the repression that we've grown up with. So really, you know, and I only have a minute, and he's counting me 27 seconds, but he doesn't know that I'm an expert, so I can do it in 15 seconds. But anyway, is that we need to stop falling into this prejudice thing, because it's too, you know, we can't continue to teach our kids to be prejudiced based upon the color of the skin. We need to do as Dr. King said, based upon the content of our character, not the color of our skin. Because we are Americans, and there are other countries that don't like us, and we better get hip to that. But as far as organic, what I was going to say about is structure. You know, I've learned a lot about the animals, and fencing we talked about, because just like golf, you can't be hitting the ball into somebody's house. You know, out of respect for people around you, you have to set your parameters and stay within them.
All right, so we have about 10 minutes for questions. We have about 4 minutes. 4 minutes for questions. All right, do we have any burning questions? Does anybody have any questions?
Well, if you don't have that orange card that you all have, please fill that out and then just leave it on your table, and I will come and pick it up. If you have not received an orange card, just find me, and I will bring one to you.
Let's give our panel one more round of applause. Thank you so much.